as a little focus group, I'm sure you've got e-ticket purchasers right here.
Absolutely.
But it must be a very different experience than writing the book itself. What is your writing experience like? What's your process like there?
Writing a book?
Or writing a book, for example.
It would be dignifying it to call it a process, but it's pretty organic. But essentially, and this is starting at rock bottom, what I need on any given day when I have no idea, this happens to every writer, you sit down and you think, well, I knew how to write yesterday, but I have no idea today, it's just, there's nothing there. But when this happens, what I need is what I call a kernel, a very vivid image, a line of dialogue, an emotional ambiance, anything that I can sense concretely. And then I write down a line or two describing whatever it is. And I sit there and stare at it. I take words out and I put them back and I move clauses around. And with the front of my mind, I'm working on the craft. I'm trying to refine that description so it is as clear and elegant and euphonious as possible. Meanwhile, the back of my mind is kicking out questions like, what time of year is it? What time of day is it? How is the light falling? Is there someone in the room with me? And, gradually all these little mushrooms, puff. I puff balls and I get little spores of other ideas that hook on. I'm a really slow writer. I don't make rough drafts and then polish them. I rewrite as I go. So by the time I have finished a scene, I will have been back and forth through it literally hundreds of times, but it will be as good as I can make it. At that point, I leave it. And if I know what happens next, I'll write that. Most of the time I don't, and I will go look for another kernel somewhere in the universe of this book. I have no idea how much ground I'm going to cover in either time or space when I start working on a book, which is why I never know whether any given book might be the last one. I mean, eventually it's going to be, but it hasn't happened yet. This isn't the last one either, by the way. But, then these things fit together.
How will you know when the story's over? Because the story can go on forever.
Technically, yes. In practice, no. No, the story won't tell me when it's over.
Have there been moments as you're writing where things that you've been surprised as what characters have done? What are some of those? Because I would imagine.
It's constant surprise. Yeah. I think, well, the first one was the third day of writing. See, I didn't know anything about Scotland or the 18th century when I began, but I did go to the ASU library and begin looking up Scotland in the 18th century. Well, the only thing that I knew about novels was that they should have conflict. So I was looking for conflict in Scotland in the 18th century. You don't do that very long without running into Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Jacobites. And I said, yeah, okay, that was like plenty of conflict, fine. Well, now I had begun writing immediately because I had met way too many historical fiction writers who have done 10 years worth of research and they don't yet feel competent to actually write a word. And in fact, they never do. And I said, well, the point here is not to learn everything about Scotland in the 18th century. The point is to learn how to write a novel. So I said, I'm going to start writing, immediately and do the research. And if I find that I've written something and it's wrong, I'll just fix it. It's words on the page, what could be easier? So I was doing that, and about the third day, I had read far enough to get a good grip on what the Jacobite Rebellion was about. And I said, well, it's essentially Scots versus English here, not to be too complex. I said, it was complex, but we keep it as simple as we can. Anyway, I said, so I must have a lot of Scotsmen because of the kilt factor. But I think it would be a good idea if I had a female character to play off these guys. That's sexual tension, that's good. And I said, if it's Scots versus English, if I make her an English woman, we will have lots of conflict. So about the third day of writing, I introduced this English woman. No idea who she was, what she was doing there, how she got into the story. But I loosed her into a cottage full of Scotsmen to see what she'd do. That was my girl. And so she walked in, they're all crouched around the fire muttering. They all turned around and stared at her. And that was the first moment of surprise. I said, why are they staring at her? What's odd? Why does she look funny? Anyway, I kept fiddling. And one of them stood up and he said, my name's Dougal Mackenzie, and who might you be? And without my stopping to think, I just typed, my name's Claire Elizabeth Beecham, and who the hell are you? And I said, well, you don't sound at all like an 18th century person. So I fought with her for several pages, trying to beat her into shape and make her talk like a historical person. She wasn't having any. She just kept making smart-ass modern remarks. And she also took over and started telling the story herself. And I said, well, fine. I'm going to fight with you all the way through this book. No one's ever going to see this. It doesn't matter what bizarre thing I do. I said, go ahead and be modern. I'll figure out how you got there later. So it's all her fault that there was time travel in these books.
The Doctor Who thing probably didn't help either.
Well, actually, Doctor Who hadn't anything to do with it except for providing me with the time and the kilt.
most about them is that they are always caught in this conflict internally between trying to find a way to be happy themselves and to be responsible to something else, whether it's history or family or their clan. Where does that come from in you? This fusion between happiness and responsibility.
I'm a Roman Catholic libertarian. No, I don't think
that would do it.
Yes, it would. But you know, at a more serious level, I don't actually think you can experience true happiness if you're only living for yourself. Yeah, you need to have something larger than yourself in order to experience true happiness. You know, whether you achieve this through Buddhism, where you know your larger something is so large that you can't even identify it, or something smaller where you feel an obligation, you either political or social, to an institution, to a family, to a loved one. But you need that something that's bigger than yourself.
That's whoa. Yeah, my mind has just been blown.
You're married, are you not?
Well, yes.
Okay, well then you know.
Family counts. It's amazing, but yes, being part of a family changes it redistributes your priorities. Doesn't necessarily make you any more competent. Doesn't make you makes you want different things.
It does, yeah. No, actually, it shakes your confidence because you're always doing something that you've never done before. But at the same time, this is how you experience personal growth, and you're not going to be happy if you're not growing either.
And that's how you undertook the project of writing a novel in the first place. I mean, you've talked about wanting to write a novel just to see, as a challenge to yourself, just to see how that happened.
Well, it was a little more than that. I've known since the age of 8 or so that I was supposed to write novels. You know, that this was, you know, my destiny, if you want to put it that way. I just knew that's what I was meant to do. That's the age at which I realized that books were written by people. They didn't just pop out of the library shelves like toilet paper in the grocery store. So I said, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. But I came from a very conservative family background. My father, who was a state senator for a long time, was prone to say to me, "You're such a poor judge of character, you're bound to marry some bum," he said. So be sure you get a good education so you can support your children. Which is why I have a PhD in quantitative behavioral ecology. Anyway, I still knew that I was supposed to write novels. I liked science, I was good at it, but I knew I was meant to write novels. And when I turned 35, I said to myself, well, you know, Mozart was dead at 36, maybe you better get a move on here, just in case. And so I said, all right, on my next birthday, I will start writing a novel. And it's not for publication, not going to show it to anyone. It's just for me to learn what it takes to write a novel. Because up to this point, I'd written all kinds of everything, including a 400-page doctoral dissertation entitled Nest Site Selection in the Pinyon Jay, Gymnorhinus cyanocephalus. Or as my husband says, why birds build nests where they do, and who cares anyway? And, you know, scholarly articles and grant proposals and documentation and tutorials and, you know, eventually software reviews for Byte InfoWorld, etc. Walt Disney comic books. Nobody had ever shown me how to write any of this stuff. I had just read a few examples, and then I wrote one, and if it didn't look quite right, I poked it till it did. So I said, well, fine, you've been reading novels for 30-odd years. Surely if you write one, you will recognize it. So I said, obviously the only way to learn how to write a novel is to write a novel. So that's the next thing. And it was.
It's Aristotelian almost. That which we have to learn to do before we can do them, we learn by doing.
That's right.
Sounds better
That's exactly
than
how it works. Yeah, it does, yeah. When you're writing
a dissertation or a scientific journal article or about or some of these other, or a comic book to a certain extent, you always have your audience in mind for what you.
No.
Well, I would say,
Sorry, you guys don't matter at all.